All right. Just getting the slides up here. We really blazed through that first part of the meeting faster than I thought we might. Very, very efficient meeting. Okay. So bearing with me. So we will go over some updates and some general background too for those that may not be familiar on PFAS and Chrome 6. These have been real hot topics over the last couple of years and longer. But we'll go over some of the updates on these contaminants, the Chrome 6, MCL, and the PFAS standards that are being worked on. So apologies again for anyone that may be familiar with all of this and knows all of this information, but just some quick refreshers for anyone that may not be intimately familiar with what we're talking about here. PFAS are a group of compounds. I think there's hundreds of them, mostly or entirely artificial. These are man-made chemicals that are produced because of their properties. They're really useful. They're called poly and perfluoroalkyl substances is the acronym. Hence, PFAS is a much easier way to say it. They are used in a lot of products that you might see in stores or that might be in use with packaging. As I understand it, a lot of these are with more information coming out about their potential health impacts. There's an effort to phase out a lot of these chemicals in favor of options that are better for the environment, but I do believe they're still fairly prevalent. They also have the nickname of forever chemicals because of their persistence, which is part of what makes them so useful. But then that also, on the flip side, really presents a challenge for removing them from the environment. So research is ongoing, but has been shown generally that it's a chronic risk, like a lot of the contaminants that are regulated. The consumption of them over time, and of course with how prevalent they are from various sources, can add up and increase your risk of things like increased cholesterol, high blood pressure, cancer. Of course, a big one. So there's a quick little graphic here. There's all kinds of things that you might find PFAS in. Firefighting foams is sort of a big one, at least as far as um, the initial effort to identify where PFAS contamination might be located. There's a lot of sites where fire agencies would hold trainings, and so they'd end up using a lot of these large quantities of these foams. So like airports and things, they're looking at sources around the facilities like that. Um, but another significant source, of course, would be landfills, where everything ends up, including our Buena Vista landfill here. Wastewater treatment plants as well, sort of a place where a lot of contaminants end up collecting, and like I mentioned, some of these sites where fire departments hold trainings, military bases as well. So it's a concern locally here. We've seen detections in a few different places. We were just talking about this. Um, it, there's the monitoring is still ongoing to really determine the extent of where you might find PFAS in local water sources. We've found it around the Buena Vista landfill. We can't make that connection black and white, one to one. Yes, it's the landfill that definitely contaminated these sources, but that does seem to be a pretty logical conclusion, regardless of where it might have come from. It will need to be addressed. Like we mentioned, the Buena Vista Migrant Center is a migrant housing complex right next to the landfill here. It's on the same property, and they installed a PFAS treatment system for those that were not aware. Just and was that was just activated last year, so they're using it now. They have a couple filter vessels. It's ion exchange filtration is the technology, and so far the results look great. Um, and so they're able to use that to remove all the detectable PFAS from the water. They're really on top of it. Of course, there's concern about exposure to anyone living there, and they were able to get some funding themselves to cover the cost of that treatment system. So as far as we're aware, that's the first treatment system for PFAS that has been installed in the state for a small water system. There are some larger water districts in Southern California, mostly, I believe, where there has been some treatment installed to address these contaminants, but of course, it's still an ongoing issue since there aren't any enforceable standards yet where water systems are required to remove these contaminants from their sources. If they do have it, there are notification levels. So we're at the point where if systems are sampling for PFAS and they're finding it, they have to, and it's above these notification levels, then they have to at least notify their customers, residents, whoever is served by those water systems. Um, like I mentioned, some standards are in development. EPA is working on them. They seem to be further along than the state is anyway. More monitoring is going to be required next year in 2027. There's another monitoring order on the state side that has been issued. So there are water systems that are required to sample. Some of yes, Paul is familiar with this. I believe San Andreas has sampled for that in their water. And eventually there will be a federal requirement to have source water and water being delivered that meets standards. Um, Looking like the earliest that's going to be is 2029. If you do have PFAS, then you have to treat for it or change sources, whatever the solution may be, consolidate. There's a possibility that could get pushed back, but that hasn't happened yet. There was some talk about it, but I think there's a lot of public concern for these chemicals as we find out more about them. So we shall see. There's still more to be determined there, and same thing with California. They are working on state standards as well, but there's less information as far as how soon that might be happening exactly. Like I mentioned, there are monitoring orders that the state has issued, so they have the ability to at least require certain water systems test for PFAS. So that's been happening, and that's how we know where some of these detections are being found. And like I mentioned, at this point, excuse me, treatment's not required, but notification is if it's above certain levels. Movie shifting gears to chromium 6. Again, for anyone not familiar, it's a heavy metal. It can be either naturally occurring or commercially, industrially produced, which was the case for the Aaron Brockovich case, PG&E contamination. Um, Locally, it is naturally occurring in South County, is where we see it in the Aptos Watsonville area, in the Aromas Red Sands aquifer. So we see a variety of levels that I'll talk about it in a little bit where the standard is, but um, we have 10 systems where we have detections above the limit for chromium 6. There's a separate standard for total chromium, and that's what's more commonly found. I believe we're the only state, maybe the only jurisdiction. I think Sierra had mentioned in her research, California is the only jurisdiction so far that actually has Chromium 6 standard. Most states, and at the federal level only regulate total chromium, which includes trivalent and hexavalent chromium, so chromium 3 and chromium 6. Chromium 6 is the toxic one. And so there's a higher standard for total chromium. And then the state has established a standard specifically for chromium 6. They first had an MCL established in 2014. Some people are very familiar with this story in the room here, but about 3 years later, there was a challenge to that because of the impact of that standard and the cost to water systems, which is a requirement to be included in establishing these standards. The argument was that the financial impact to small water systems was not adequately considered by the state. The judge agreed, so it was taken off the books until 2024, when the state came back with same standard, 10 parts per billion, which is where it is currently. And that was effective October 1st of 2024, with sampling required to begin within 6 months of that date. There was also an option to include or to use previous monitoring. I believe it was within the past 2 years or so of that MCL going into effect. So all this applies to community and non-transient, non-community systems, what we call NTNC systems. So schools and workplaces, facilities that have their own water source, where you have the same group of people showing up most days, and there is a concern with consumption exposure over time. So there is some time built in to this standard. Like we have here, for any water systems that are over the limit, there is a requirement to submit a compliance plan within 90 days, which we have several systems that have submitted their plans, and we reviewed those, where they have to explain what they're considering to address the problem, whether it be installing treatment, point of use, or centralized, or looking at consolidation with another system that may have a better source or better supply that would address the issue. For small water systems, there were 4 years built into the MCL, where they have time to work on those solutions, identify what's going to be feasible for them, any construction for that to happen. And so in 2028 is the deadline for that, for small water systems with less than 1,000 service connections. In the meantime, notification is required, and this is for all systems with an exceedance of the MCL. They're not considered out of compliance with the standard, but they do have to inform their residents, which a lot of people are seeing that now, including with the larger water systems like Central Water District. I'm on Central Water District, and I got a Chrome 6 notice in the mail. A lot of people might have seen that, including Soco Creek Water District. Also had to send those out. So like I mentioned, we have 10 small water systems currently that are over the limit of the Chrome 6 MCL. So we're looking at solutions for those. For mostly it's likely going to be point of use treatment, where they could install devices on each connection, probably likely within the house where the water is being used. There's all kinds of considerations as far as that goes, but generally that's going to be a more feasible option for these small systems, where centralized treatment might be cost prohibitive. So I think, let me see, I think those are the slides that I had on Chrome 6 and PFAS. And I believe we were going to move, Sean has some
Thanks,
slides
Nathan.
that he's going to share. Yep.
Can I make one comment here before Sean starts?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to bring in one other piece that we've found as we're starting to look at centralized, treatment for both of these things. One issue that we have here in Santa Cruz County is that if you treat for this stuff, you end up with a brine or waste. And one of the big parts of the expense is actually getting rid of that waste. And the nearest place that takes it is, I think, in Monterey. So I just thought I would bring that up.
And that's an ongoing cost.
That's an ongoing cost. Yeah. Whereas, by the way, if you do it with point of use, you just throw those things away. And so they end up in our dump. Yeah. And they end up in our dump and then they go back into the water table.
All right. And so if everyone online could just confirm that you can hear and see me okay. Nathan, if you wouldn't mind. If slides are good.
Yep. That looks good. Can see the slides.
I suppose I could see it
And
here. So.
can hear you well.
All right. And so I'm going to be talking about the point of use, using point of use, point of entry as a possible regulatory compliance method. Paul, you're going to be hearing some double, but
That's okay. All good. This was a great document.
Great. I'm glad that you appreciated that. So first off, just for anybody who's not familiar, what's point of use, point of POU, POE is point of use and point of entry. Point of use is a form of treatment where instead of treating the entire supply of your water, you are actually treating it at the demand side of it. So in a point of use case, you are treating at the sink that is being used for consumption. So generally that'd be a kitchen sink. As opposed to a point of entry treats the entire household. So there'll be a larger treatment system that treats all the water going into the household. And depending on your contaminant, that'll generally be what is the deciding factor, whether you're going point of use or point of entry. Point of use, you're generally looking at something that is a consumption hazard, where if you consume it, this is thinking of hexavalent chromium, thinking of PFAS. If you consume it for long periods of time, it can be a problem. Whereas point of entry, you're going to be looking at something that is not only consumption, but also an inhalation risk. So the first contaminant that I think of is 1,2,3-TCP. It's a type of contaminant that was used in pesticides. And when it is in hot water and steamy hot water, it'll volatilize and become breathable. So obviously you can't shower using that water. So for particular contaminants, particularly volatile organic contaminants, you're going to be looking at point of entry treatment systems. I'm going to get into couple more details that are different about those two when we get a little further into the presentation. Why are we talking about point of use, point of entry treatment systems? Nathan's presentation already kind of touched on this. There's a bunch of new contaminants that are coming online. We're thinking of the hexavalent chromium. We're thinking of the PFAS. These new contaminants that previously weren't having a regulatory limit or a higher regulatory limit associated with them. And as the changes come into place, small water systems that previously did not have to treat their water now suddenly are in a position where their water, which has not changed, no longer meets regulatory standards. So they're needing to figure out how to treat their water when they haven't historically. Generally, that comes in two different forms. There's the point of use, point of entry option, and then there's also centralized treatment. This is a large centralized treatment unit that is the one on the left there for folks online. That is a large centralized treatment system for PFAS. And the one image on the right is a under sink point of use treatment system. You can imagine which one of those is more expensive than the other ones. That is a very big limiting factor for centralized treatment, especially for very small water systems, because they have much fewer connections to spread the cost of the unit, the major centralized unit across. So centralized treatment is often prohibitively expensive for a very small water system. And that makes point of use, point of entry a really interesting alternative. And for reasons that we're going to get into in a little bit, because they are smaller, point of use, point of entry is actually a bit more viable than it would be for a much larger water system. So as I mentioned, economic feasibility is a big important part of this. You are not allowed to just decide, we're just going to go point of use, point of entry. That seems like it's going to be a lot easier. We're just going to do that. The state, in order to apply for a permit that will allow you to use this point of use, point of entry as your treatment method, you have to rule out the possibility that you have to show that it is economically infeasible to do centralized treatment. It seems to be the state's preferred option for centralized treatment to be the pursued option. So as I mentioned, you have to show that it's economically infeasible. And the way that you do that is this method that was provided in the code that showed this. So the cost of the centralized treatment has to be 1% of the median household income for your area. And the combined water cost has to be greater than 2% of your median household income. So that's your cost of the centralized treatment plus what you are already essentially paying for the water. That's the distribution, all that kind of stuff. Paul?
I just, again, want to add the comment here that those are not actually small numbers.
Right. And
You-
I'm going to be showing you exactly. Yeah, it's not an immediate easy thing to get across. And I'm going to give you an example, like I said, but one additional thing that Paul mentioned is that you can't just say, okay, it's not economically infeasible. You also have to make an effort to apply for grant funding. And that does not mean you have to get grant funding. It doesn't even necessarily mean that you have to like go through a particularly long process. You just need to start the process of looking at a grant and saying, we've looked at a grant from here. That's one additional criteria.
Just wanted to ask, is the MHI, is that the same as area median income, or are they two?
I'm not familiar with area median income. In the example that I use, we're using census data. So this is the example. You can use census data, which is available. I can provide it's provided in the guidance document that's in the agenda. You can find your census area. And in this example, we're using the Aptos Hills Larkin Valley area, which has a median household income of $158,788. So if you're thinking about centralized treatment, it needs to cost more than $1,588 annually, or $132 a month per customer. And the total household cost for the water has to be more than $265 per month. It has to be both of those. So if you may, for whatever reason, already be over on the total household income, it's already more than $265. You still have to have it be 1% of the total income for centralized treatment. So that's as Paul mentioned, that's not necessarily an easy bar to clear.
So the capital cost for centralized treatment, so for the first one?
Yeah, so that's a good question, is that it doesn't necessarily need to be over a single year. You can, like, let's say that you had to get a loan or something like that, you could figure out how that loan cost works out for that period of time. So you have a little bit of leeway on how you're gonna figure out what that cost is.
The life of the centralized
Yeah.
treatment system, it might
Oh,
have
there you
a 20-year or 30-year
Yeah.
life. And
Yeah.
one of the problems here, I think, is that you can end up with a pretty expensive centralized treatment system before you break these numbers.
There's a question in the chat about when we're going to take questions. So if you have a clarification question about the presentation that you're like, I won't understand this if we don't answer this, then go ahead and raise your hand now. Otherwise, as soon as Sean gets through the presentation, that's when we'll open it up to Q&A.
Sorry.
That's
Yeah,
fair.
that's okay.
Okay. Did everybody get their clarifying questions on this particular slide before I move on?
Yeah, not seeing anything on that.
All right, and so there's some installation requirements for when you're using a point of use. I'm going to be mostly referring to point of use going forward, just for folks The main distinction for point of entry is that, as I mentioned before, it does allow you to treat a larger variety of contaminants, particularly the volatiles. The general requirements are largely the same between the two, so I'm going to mostly be referring to point of use. So the first one is that every single one of these point of use devices needs to be owned, operated, and maintained by the water system. So that's why it makes a big difference that the water system is smaller. A large water system is going to have a lot harder time managing 100, 200 of these devices. Very challenging. There are, ways that you can do that. It's more manageable for a smaller water system. Second is that every home you should be planning that is going to have a point of use treatment system. You're going to have 20, 30, 40, 50, however many connections. You may find a situation where one particular holdout is preventing you from getting the application, getting the permit in. You may have those situations. There are abilities for us to make adjustments in your permit for those situations, but it is not a guaranteed, and it is not something that you should expect. So you should plan on every single household having that. With that in mind, there are possibilities that if you have one person, something like that, you really can't get through. We may still be able to make something work, which is something that you don't want to rely on. Every point of use device has to be either ANSI certified or approved by the state board for the contaminant that you are treating. So you're going to be wanting to find something that has hexavalent chromium specific protection. PFAS is a little bit challenging because it's not quite as far along in a lot of the regulatory terms. So like including finding treatment systems that are approved to remove PFAS. But in this particular instance, hexavalent chromium is the one that you're going to want to make sure that you are on an approved list for hexavalent chromium. And the devices that you're using, you're going to be wanting to have some sort of pilot testing in place. Ideally, like 1 or 2 of the homes will get started early and be using the devices for a period of time to show how they're going to be functioning in the actual setting with that actual water chemistry. Because water chemistry does change between different areas, so the devices might not function exactly as they say on the tin. So those are requirements before you get those units approved. So when you're going to do your permit application to update your permit so that you can get point of use, point of entry on your permit saying we are approved to treat hexavalent chromium, PFAS, whatever it may be, you'll need to put together some documents as part of the process. The first is a POU treatment strategy. That's essentially how you're going to work with your customers. How you're going to decide access agreements, because point of use, point of entry, or point of use is going to be inside the home. So you're going to have to find a way to get access to the homes on a particular schedule. So they're going to have to be aware of that. What are you going to do notification wise? If a unit fails for some reason, how are you going to handle notification? How are you going to handle if your particular unit gets tested and comes back with an exceedance? How are you going to handle all that kind of stuff? So that's what that part of the plan is about. The POU operations and maintenance plan is essentially just how you're going to keep them working. A big important document on this would be like if you're having a contractor run or maintain the units, what's your contractor agreement? What are they expecting to do? What are they expected to have on hand? What are you expected to have on hand? All of that kind of stuff to make sure that your units are not experiencing long downtimes. The POU monitoring plan, that is just what it sounds like, what schedule you're going to be testing all your units on, and each one of these units is going to have a sampling ID associated with it that every single one of the tests that goes on that point of use device is going to get reported to. So there's complication there for getting everything reported and sampled on a timely basis. And finally, for community water systems, you have to have a public process where you get approval essentially for this option. So what that looks like is that you're going to have a public hearing. You're going to bring all the documents that I just mentioned, including that economic feasibility section, you're going to provide your customers with those documents, and no more than 30 days later, excuse me, no less than 30 days later, you're going to have a public hearing to discuss the plan and all of that. And then you'll provide a survey for customers to say yay or nay, essentially. And you will be able to move forward with a point of use, point of entry if more than 50%, 50 plus one, all households vote yes. That means all households, not just the people who voted. You may not have everybody vote for whatever reason. It has to be 50% of all households, and you don't have any more than 25% voting no. So that's how you'll be able to get approval from there. Once you have done all of that, you would get your permit approved. We have everything that we need. You would do all your testing, all that kind of stuff ongoing. You are monitoring your system, you're sampling and all of that. This can only last for 3 years at a time. Every time that 3-year window is up, you have to have another public hearing to confirm that nobody is still against it. You continue to not have substantial opposition is the wording of the law. And you have to provide again proof that centralized treatment is still economically infeasible. So that has to happen every 3 years. So as I said, you can do an ongoing point of use, point of entry as your method of treatment, but it does come with extra strings attached. It comes with extra hoops to jump through. And those are the main things. And from there, we can go to questions.
All right, so if you're on the call, I believe if you raise your hand, we should be able to see it. But if you're raising your hand right now, we don't see it, which means you should just unmute and start talking.
I'll back up a little bit and see if we can read through.
Yeah, I have the written comments.
A question too, Sean. So you mentioned centralized treatment. You've got to, a requirement is to apply for grants.
Right.
Are grant resources made available to these small water systems, or is it just kind of go out and find them?
No, there are grant options available, but what we found is that a lot of the grant options that are available tend to be towards lower income households. And it's not necessarily, there's not necessarily a lot of overlap with where we're finding there's a lot of need for these treatment options, at least not for the water systems that we're seeing.
Got it.
If your community isn't a disadvantaged community, your grant options are extremely limited.
Yeah.
Yeah, you might have better luck with low interest loans through SRF, but that's a state revolving fund. Sorry for the acronyms. Any questions?
Did you have a question?
Yeah.
Oh, I was just curious, do you need to provide a rejection letter if you don't get a grant? Like, how do we prove that we tried?
No, the language of the law was that you need to make the attempt to apply for a grant. So it did not specify, to my knowledge, that you need to provide any particular kind of document.
Got it.
We would just want to see that you've tried, you've made the effort. Speaking.
Some of the grant applications require a lot of work and a lot of technical expertise to substantiate the application. How does that work? I mean.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. As the grants are not necessarily easy to apply for,
Yeah.
the limited options that even are available.
I'd like to, if I could answer that directly. So Becky, what we're doing is that we actually went to the EPA for TA technical assistance. We got a grant to get the technical assistance to provide a preliminary engineering report, which is what all the grant funders need. So you can get that for free, but it's a process. It takes time. It's probably a year-long process from the time you start to the time that you would have a preliminary engineering report. And most of the grant funders require a PER, preliminary engineering report, for the grant funding.
Martin Mills made a comment that SRF is very tough to get through, which it is, and it requires you to address options of consolidation as well, which is, I assume, part of the engineering report. But,
Were you a disadvantaged community?
No,
And you got TA?
yeah,
and Troy Boone is saying that RCAC has technical assistance as well, which is a good
Yes.
resource. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the hard part, because it's like you need an engineer to design a treatment system to know how much centralized treatment costs.
Yep.
And it probably, TA wise, you're probably getting like upwards of $20,000 worth of work done just to get
yes.
the amount of money it's gonna cost to that you then go seek another grant.
Right.
So the systems that maybe don't get the TA for the preliminary engineering report, we're just pulling numbers out of thin air and saying, well, it's gonna be too expensive. So hopefully that's sufficient. Cause it's like, we can't hire an engineer to give us a estimate construction costs,
Mhm.
cause that costs money.
Right.
Yep.
And clarification, the point of use is typically reverse osmosis, in this case for these contaminants.
Yeah, those are almost always a reverse osmosis unit.
And point of entry is the same.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
it'll depend, some units will be different, but I believe all point of use and point of entry units tend to be reverse osmosis. Ms. Megan?
You mentioned that you also have to provide information about potential consolidation. To what level of verification do you have to provide information that consolidation is not feasible or possible?
For this particular application, it's not, you wouldn't have to refer to consolidation as an option. But I believe that what somebody else mentioned was that a lot of these grants, that when you're applying for them, they will want you to consider what the possibilities for consolidation are. So if you're looking to apply for a grant, to say that you've made the attempt to apply for a grant, that's when you might have to show how feasible consolidation is.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So you would then have to go to the agency that you would could consolidate with and have them present you information about what it would cost to consolidate, or would that come from LAFCO, or how would that work?
We actually do our guidance document that we are just recently released. We did do some analyses of what it would cost and a broad ballpark estimate to connect for a lot of these water systems. So we did give a number for a lot of these systems on what that they may be able to hang their hat on
Yeah.
as how expensive it would be to consolidate.
There's a question on the call. Adam, are you able to unmute yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So in regards to point of use as an option, as you've said, reverse osmosis is likely going to be the option. With reverse osmosis, similar to other treatments, the disadvantage is the waste stream, the stuff you're removing. Where is that going? Since it's going to be a concentrated amount, and usually that's into people's septic tank. And being that the septic systems or on-site waste are really in questionable condition around the county, will there be the ability of the water system itself, since septic systems do pollute groundwater over time, will there be the ability for the water system to also regulate that each connection have a properly maintained on-site septic or on-site wastewater system to prevent that, so they're not contaminating their own well? And would they have the support of environmental health that also regulates the on-site waste?
Oh, that is a really excellent question, Adam. And you're bringing up a concern that we've talked about from a PFAS perspective, the concern that certain treatment types might end up making the situation worse over time because of concentrating things in the septic system. We haven't really talked about it from a hexavalent chromium perspective, but I do think that is actually a very salient point. I know that the land use team, it's not this staff, so unfortunately we might not be able to give you a great answer at the moment, but there are limitations on the types of water treatment systems that they will allow during the time of construction, or during the time of a septic system being built. For example, if you have really high chlorides, they might not allow you to do some sort of on-site treatment that would introduce concentrated salts into your septic system for obvious reasons. And I don't think this has come up yet with them, but I think it needs to. I'm open to other thoughts or suggestions on this issue. That's a really good point. Yeah. Yeah.
Can I jump in?
Yes, please. Is that Troy?
Yeah, just with regard to Chrome 6, just remember it's in Santa Cruz is naturally occurring. So you're
Right.
pulling it out of the well somewhere in the aquifer, and you're disposing of it in your septic system. So it's kind of going back to where it came from. As long as the septic systems are well enough away from the well, which they typically are when they get installed, I would say it's probably like the best of the not so great situations, if you're going to be returning something to the land, because it's naturally occurring. So if it were PFAS, I'd be way more concerned. But then also, like Sarah brought up, the technology to remove certain contaminants with a septic system, it's pretty minimal. The septic systems are typically, there's like a settling chamber for solids, and then there's like some biological activity, but I'm not aware of any privately owned household septic system that would be able to remove a contaminant. It'd be pretty expensive, and then you'd have to like have some degree of expertise to operate it, I'm sure. So there's my input on that.
Yeah, I wonder if there's someone studying this. I'm gonna dig into this a little. I think there's different.
I wanted to bring up just one more point related to all those, that maybe a point that ought to make it into the next rev of this document. One of the things that we've been considering as we've been working on developing plans and everything is that there's a liability issue here for the water company. And that's separate from having a plan and having an agreement with people and everything. What happens, there's 2 or 3 types of liability. The first type is that you put this system in point of use next to somebody's sink or under somebody's sink, and it leaks and it damages their house. That's sort of the simplest liability. The second level of liability is that you put this system in and they still get cancer, 10 years from now or something like that. Are you now the water company liable for this? So there's a whole set of legal issues that have not been addressed by the state or anybody about, these point of view systems. So I don't have any answers, but I'm just for people who are involved in all this, that's another issue you have to consider.
Absolutely. And I wish I had some answers for you on that one too.
If I could jump in again.
Yeah. Troy?
Yeah, well, that's why the devices are ANSI approved. If it's ANSI approved to remove a contaminant, then there's some level of protection there. I mean, you have to meet a reasonable standard. You're not just like grabbing anything off the wall like a Brita filter and saying, okay, here's our treatment. So I mean, you could take a step further, and in order to accept the device and have installed, sign a waiver. You could go that distance, but I've never heard of that being required, but it would be, something prudent to look into. But typically that's why you use a device that's been approved by a third party that's an expert at evaluating these devices. So.
And just continuing sort of on that, if you were to install a centralized treatment system and somebody gets cancer 10 years down the road, you can show that it likely wasn't as a result of the centralized treatment system because you're testing it. And you would be testing each one of those POU devices on a regular enough basis that you could say, we are confident that this unit was functioning during that time period. So you'd be able to say that here's our testing record, here's our permit saying that we were treating as we needed to, so that sort of thing. So that theoretically would provide the same liability protection as if you were going to be installing a centralized treatment system.
Adam, is your hand up again? If so, go ahead.
Oh, no, I thought I had turned it off. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. Jeremy, go ahead. You'll have to unmute yourself. There you
There
go.
we go. Okay, sorry about that. This is for specifically hexavalent chromium. Is there a reason why the state has not come up with a clear statement of how long someone would have to be exposed to what volumes of water for this to be potential cancer risk?
I
Mm.
wouldn't be able to speak.
Yeah,
to
I
that,
don't-
but know the answer to that.
Anyone here?
Probably toxicological studies.
Yeah.
There's a,
It's very vague, right?
Yeah.
They allude to it. They say, you know, over long periods of time, but what is long?
Yeah,
I believe the public health goal defines it as 70 years.
Okay, this is good. 70 years.
Don't
And
quote me on
and
that.
what levels?
Yeah,
you'd have,
Meeting being recorded.
right.
yeah. We're suggesting reviewing the public health goal documentation because they go into that.
Yeah, the public health goal for Chrome 6 is 0.
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. Because we've been getting lots of requests for information and implying that you know, we'll just say in school districts that we're exposing the kids to poison water and so on and so forth. And they like to point to what the state is saying through the use of the notification language,
Mhm.
which is a little bit damning, but why is it so difficult to find something that offers a little bit more clarification? If the county could provide or make light to that, shed some light to that, that would be really helpful.
We might be able to add links to the public health goal content on the small water system page, maybe.
That would be great.
Yeah, Nathan had added some comments. Nathan, do you want to state out loud what you put in the chat?
Sure. I was speaking to a comment that Martin had added in earlier, which is about the amount of water using that you need to use for reverse osmosis. It's significant. You know, he was asking if that's around, that's, you know, 3 gallons of water for every gallon produced. I've seen estimates of 2 gallons per every gallon, and I'm sure it varies depending on the type of unit. But yeah, then you would really want to limit where those treatment devices are, depending on the routes of exposure that you're concerned with for the contaminant in question. You know, so you'd only have an RO device on a kitchen tap, and then use that for drinking water. And then if it's not a concern for showering, then you wouldn't need to treat the water that you use for that. But either way, yeah, RO treatment, it's a significant increase in the amount of water that you need to use. That's a big consideration when looking at that type of treatment.
I'm curious what level of diligence the water system will have to go through to find out how many individual units or houses there are. Like, there could be duplexes, there could be unpermitted ADUs. And I'm working with a water system where these lots are huge, and I
Sure.
have no idea, and I don't know if other people have a very clear idea of how many, you know, individual primary occupied units there are. I'm not to say that people won't give us that information, but I'm just curious. We might not even know. We get all the houses. So,
Right.
but we'll just do our best.
No, that's a good point. We would definitely, because every water system should already be reporting how many connections it has, that sort of thing. We would obviously be expecting to see that every single one of the existing known connections is accounted for. You know, the county the assessor's webpage, also for each parcel will show how many, you know, permitted dwelling units are on a property. So we would want to see that those are accounted for also, even if they're not necessarily marked as a connection on the system. At a certain point, if it's an unpermitted dwelling that somebody doesn't want them to know about, there's only so much you can do on that front, but,
The engineer report should also
right.
do some physical, whoever's doing the engineering report would have to do some on the ground work to kind of verify and ground truth things.
Right.
Which engineering?
Well, if you're going for the point of use systems, whatever, you'd have the justification, because you'd have to have
Your permitting
compared.
documents.
Yeah, your
yes.
permitting documents, all
Those
of
ones
that.
were listed.
Yeah.
The treatment strategy, or you're saying for the centralized treatment economic analysis?
If you're talking about point of use treatment systems, you'll have to have already come up with an estimate and done some
Yeah.
engineering to show that point of use is going to be better. And during that process, hopefully that should have been done by an engineer with some due diligence associated with it. Like you're going to want to make sure you've got people on the ground verifying this. I don't know, Paul,
Right.
do you want to speak to your experience doing?
And that is a
Yes.
good point that I didn't make super explicit, is that as part of the cost estimate, you're also going to want to figure out how expensive it is to do point of use treatment, because that's obviously not free. So you want to make that comparison between the centralized versus the point of use. And yeah.
Right now, we're in the middle of the engineering consulting. This is the EPA through, the TA program through sub-consultants. It's a sub-consultant to a sub-consultant to the EPA is doing this, and they are evaluating both centralized and point of use for both cost and I forget what they call it, but whatever is the most effective treatment or, for us.
That includes the cost of the initial system maintenance and testing and everything.
That's correct.
Because it seems significantly more like testing going on for the point of use.
That's correct. Yeah. And waste stream also. That here again in Santa Cruz County for centralized is a big deal, and we'll have to see. We discussed that the water from a RO system would go into, the wastewater from an RO system would go into the septic tank. There's also replacement of the media, once a year or every 6 months, or depending on the volume of use. And then that media gets thrown away. So.
Makes me wonder if the comment about the reverse osmosis technology and the waste stream makes me wonder if that at some point might require so much more source water, especially for central treatment, that it would make it infeasible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for centralized treatment, just preliminarily, it seems like ion exchange is the treatment of, is the preferred treatment method.
And ion exchange, the water passes through and it's removed, and there's no waste stream, but you do have to eventually dispose of that ion exchange, which is what Paul mentioned earlier. And that has a cost associated with it.
There's basically a brine that you have to carry off once a week, once a month with ion exchange. Go ahead.
There's been a hand online for a while, so go ahead, Troy.
Sure. Yeah, I wanted to get back to Jeremy's question, but it looked like he was exiting. But for those of you who don't know me, I used to sit in Nathan's seat some years ago, and initially a number of systems, including San Andreas, pushed back on this with the state. There was a lawsuit, and one of the things that we brought to light was, hey, where are the cancer clusters here in Santa Cruz County and all the other parts of the state where this is naturally occurring? And basically the state couldn't point to any cancer clusters around these low levels of hexavalent chrome, of chrome 6. The most infamous case, which Aaron Brockovich got involved with, was in the Mojave Desert. I believe it was the town of Hinckley. And they had more than 30 times the California drinking water standard. you know, they were like, I think, was it 580 parts per billion? And there they had like over 200 cancer cases. And so that was part of the push from when it went from 10 ppb. And, you know, there's like no feasibility on, you know, treatment for small systems or anything like that. So that's why the standard, part of the reason why the standard got suspended for a while. But then, you know, as we can see, it got reinstated. So I just wanted to comment on that if Jeremy's still around. And then also, yeah, with point of use, the big issue is, you know, getting once you put the treatment inside someone's house, getting access to that. So that's why it's important that the water system own it, but still, you know, who's living where, you know, is there a second unit, you know, that kind of thing. So there's, you know, some volunteering, hopefully, of honest information. So a little background for you.
Thanks, Trey. Kelly?
I was curious before that, like, you know, you have the great fortune of having a retained professional engineering firm preparing this report. And I guess I was wanted to check if the state provided specifications on like that economic feasibility assessment. Like, what does it need to be a stamp by a licensed engineer? Does it, what information does it need to include? Because at times I felt like we're doing back of the envelope calculations and then just moving on to POU, but clearly that's not maybe the option here. I mean, if you can get TA, that's great, but I just don't know if everyone can.
Yeah, and that was part of why I created the guidance documents, that it did not seem like there is a significant amount of guidance on what exactly is required.
Yeah.
I can see if maybe because hexavalent chromium is now a thing that is hitting on a lot more small water systems, that maybe the state does have some more guidance on exactly what they would want to see as part of getting a permitted point of use, point of entry system. Yeah, we'd want to see due diligence be done, that, you know, the costs were now analyzed and all of that. Yeah.
I just want to say to Paul's point that the most popular treatment method is ion exchange. Soquel Creek Water District is actually not using that. They're using a different system, and I think it's activated charcoal, but I was surprised. They did a pilot project before, at the time back in the past when it looked like the requirement was going to change, and they did use IonX. And stopped it when the court made it back off. But now that they're moving forward, they're not using ion exchange.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting.
I heard they are. So,
Yeah.
from Tosh.
I don't want to go too far down
Yeah.
a rat hole here, but so whether chromium exists as Chrome 3 or Chrome 6 depends on the pH of the water. And you can convert Chrome 6 to Chrome 3, and then as it goes in the pipes to the house, it converts back to Chrome 6 because of the pH of the water. So there's a lot of issues. So you're smiling. Is that a nervous smile?
Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, it's very complicated. And I know that part of the original stuff that Soquel Creek was doing is that they were converting Chrome 6 to Chrome 3. But somehow or another that failed along the way. And I don't have firsthand, our technical guy talks to Tosh all the time. So I'm not the
There's also the issue of once you ingest the water and it hits your stomach acid, it converts as well. So in the end, what's the point?
Yeah.
I've never heard that. It's wild. I do want to point out just that we do have, one other sort of big item on the agenda. So make sure that we've covered every major question though before we move on.
Do you have any additional comments or questions that folks would like to add on?
Adam had a comment about the
Yeah.
whether or not pH affects chromium state. I don't know if you want to speak more to that. But he said it's more than just pH.
Oh, no, yeah, nothing, no, not a criticism, just it's a lot more complicated than pH alone. And then you could say, in the stomach, it does convert back to Chrome 3. Kind of the human body is a good filter for it too, but then you look, well, we get cases of stomach cancer too, and so it's a really tricky situation. But in terms of treatment too, yeah, it's a little more than pH. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That's helpful. It is complicated.
Yes.
My only sort of summary comment here is that the work that Sean and Nathan have done on this document is the first and only place that I have seen all the requirements put together in one place and in a coherent manner. So I thank you, and I think it's really, really good. We've been sort of working in the dark on this for 18 months now or something, and I have enough experience to read the document and know that the document is good. So I hope that other people will look at it.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I didn't just run it through ChatGPT. Beat you to it.
Maybe get to that point, Paul, maybe we should be sure to send a copy to our friends at the state board.
Yes.
Okay, if you need a starting point and you don't want to use ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
Is that along with the letter that you're turning all this?
Yeah. And by the way,
nice segue.
That is a great segue. That's why he's going to be vice chair.
All right. Well, there's no more questions. Let's move on to item 2, or item G2, feedback regarding the continuation of the local primacy agency.
Right. Nathan, you had a PowerPoint for this too, right?
Yes, I have some slides.
So Nathan will pull that up and I'll just introduce the item. So this is something for those of you who don't regularly attend the Water Advisory Commission meetings. This is something we brought up for the first time at the meeting in February, which is sort of a reality check for the county on how on being able to maintain our local primacy agency. We've had our local primacy agency, and I know Nathan will go into the background, since it was approved in 1994, I believe. And it's been a really wonderful given us this ability to have these really close connections with the small water systems in the county. Our relationship with small water systems isn't just through the primacy agency. We also work with them in a number of others. Factors like the well permitting issues with Senate Bill 552. There's a lot more collaboration needed and warranted, and it's awful to talk about kind of giving up this local control. However, the numbers kind of speak for themselves and are a really big concern for us at the county, given kind of long-term budget forecasts being sort of challenging, and then the reality of affordability for the water systems themselves. For the county to continue operating as we have as a primacy agency, we would have to have the water systems pay significantly higher than they already are, and they are already paying more than the state permit fees cost. So that's sort of why this is coming up, is just like sort of this reality is it's really hard. It's hard to find a way forward with the county continuing to operate this way as the local primacy agency. And it's not just us. The state used to offer grants to offset the cost to LPAs, and they have, the last one ended in 2021, and we've given it a few years of kind of reminding them and pushing and poking and saying we really would like to see this continue, and basically it's been made pretty clear to us that there is no intention at the moment for this at the state level to continue to subsidize local primacy agencies, and many of these are in part the reasons why our neighbors in Monterey County recently gave back their primacy and why we need to look at it seriously here. So sorry, you're going to hear that again from Nathan now. I kind of rambled there. Yeah, my bad. Go ahead, Nathan, take it away.
All right, thank you, Sarah. No, that was a good summary that hit a lot of the important points. So I'll go through this quickly just to give everyone the basics of what we're talking about here. Again, this is probably ad nauseum for most people. I know it is for me, but basically we have our program within the county. We oversee state small water systems, which are 5 to 14 connections. More or less, there's some more nuance to that, but and then the bulk of it, which is the local primacy agency, is public water systems. So that's small public water systems, really, community systems with 15 to 199 connections, and it also includes non-community systems. Basically, a public water system serves 25 or more people for 60 or more days per year. So, like Sierra mentioned, we have delegated primacy from the state. The agency currently is the State Water Resources Control Board. It used to be under the Department of Public Health, which in its prior iteration was the Department of Health Services, and that's the department that originally we applied for primacy from in 1994. That was when that program was established to more formalize exactly what's required for these water systems and of the regulatory agency that oversees them. And at that time, there wasn't an office in Monterey like there is now. The closest was in Berkeley, so it was even less. The state was even less accessible to local water systems at that point. Like Sierra mentioned, so there's been a decline in the number of LPA counties. About 10 years ago, there were 36. Currently, there are 25. Maybe one of the biggest red flags for us was when Monterey County returned their program last year. I believe they were the largest LPA in the state. I think they're one of the largest counties, at least as far as I think by area and on. Anyway. So we have in our program 68 public water systems, give or take. So we usually have some either on the way out or on the way in, but that's about how large our program is. So that's how many systems would be affected if we return the LPA program. We would still be overseeing and working with the state small water systems. They would still have an annual permit through us, and we would be working with them on their sampling and maintaining their systems. And to go over the core problems, like Sierra mentioned, also the county fees are a lot higher than what the state charges, because we have a much smaller base of systems to spread that cost over. I'll put up some numbers in a few minutes here, but generally across the board, the state permit fees are cheaper, and there's also some discounts included in the state fee structure for disadvantaged communities, for income, for systems with income challenges, and so basically it's not looking like there's going to be any additional funding coming for counties to help support them with these programs to offset some of that cost. There was a bill that was put forth in 2020, but that didn't go through, and there's no current discussion of legislation that's likely to move forward. We did also discuss this with the Division of Drinking Water. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had a conference workshop for LPA, so that I asked that question, and the deputy director, Darren, basically he confirmed that there's really not any plans for the state to be able to offer funding. I mean, they have their own challenges, of course. Budgets are aren't getting any easier. So we're going to have to support this program ourselves if we are going to continue running it. Generally, the difference in what we're able to bring in with permit fees and enforcement costs is about 125,000 less than what the program costs as a whole, including all of the other related costs. And back when the program was first established, the general fund commitment was around $6,000 in 1994. Adjust that for inflation is about $13,000. So you can see it's quite a bit less. And that does speak to just the increased costs of everything basically, but also the increased resources that we need to run the program with all of the requirements that have been added since that time. We've got 1.3 FTE involved with this program for staffing, as well as some administrative support.
And Nathan,
yeah.
Can I just point out, it's actually,
yes,
the 125,000 was actually a low estimate. And when I ran the numbers for the when I did the staff report, it's actually closer to 160,000. When you take into account all of the administrative overhead that I hadn't fully captured before, so that number's even bigger.
Yeah, thank you. And then I have that spreadsheet. No, that's fine. That's important to point out. I have the spreadsheet. I will put that up after I have a few other slides, but we'll look at those actual numbers just to get a glimpse of what's projected, what we're having to budget for. Again, we'll look at the number. Belabor this too much as far as the difference goes, but you can see it is significant. And comparing the permit fees, there's only one system, Cabrillo College, because of the number of people that they serve. I don't even know exactly how the state calculates that because of what they have in their fee structure. I think it would be sort of astronomical, so that there must be some sort of scaling involved. But in any case, basically what we're looking at here, first and most obvious option is to return primacy back to the state. That eliminates that cost to the general fund, which is becoming more of an issue as budgets are tightening here. The county has a massive shortfall looming. So with the shift to the state, almost all the systems all our water systems would have a lower permit fee. If we were to raise fees, of course, that would help to cover our costs, but going forward, there's still questions about long-term sustainability of that. I mean, we expect more and more requirements to be coming for water systems. So eventually that may also not cover the true cost of the program. And then there's the significant concern for all our small water systems, whether or not they would be able to pay that. And then the other option to reduce staffing was considered, but it would be too impactful to all the activities that we're required to do and maintain a minimum level for our program. So that's not an avenue that we're seriously considering at this point. So
I want to point
out,
Nathan, to your comments about, it's 1.3 FTE right now. It was it was like 0.45 FTE when the program started. And a lot of that it's not like we've added more bureaucracy. It's more regulations coming down on the water systems means more staff time to review compliance. And those have gone up significantly, as everyone is aware. And so as the burdens on water systems increase, the burdens on regulating water systems increase. And it'd be impossible to do the LPA with the staffing level that it was done when the program was initiated. Unless you had like a super person. I still think physically you couldn't even, you couldn't do it.
Yeah.
All right,
okay. So it's Sierra, if you want to run through these numbers? or-
Yeah, so, everyone knows the permit fees structure. It's you get your permit fees, those of you who are regulated facilities, and it's all on the unified fee schedule. So when we do our annual budget, we look at, how many systems do we have? What are the fees? And we have been, as you know, increasing over time, the fees, but there was quite a substantial period where we were not increasing them fast enough. I don't think we even did cost of living for a few years there. So we bring in the total cost of the program is about 324,000, and that's basically staff time plus overhead. Overhead is significant too, and that's sort of out of our control, unfortunately. But our total fees only pay for about half of the overall cost. So we're talking about can you scroll down, Nathan,
Mhm.
to the bottom where I kind of compare realistically, we'd
Yeah, the fees.
we'd have to double fees in order to fully cover the cost. It might be that there's some middle ground where some costs continue to be subsidized to some extent, but knowing that hexavalent chromium, PFAS, all of the Senate Bill 552, 1188, all of those haven't even gone into effect yet. And so all of that is going to increase the cost of compliance for the systems, but also for ensuring compliance by the regulatory agencies. So, we might say are you willing to double your fees? And maybe someone will be like, okay. And then in 5 years, when all these new regulations are in effect, you're like, by the way, how do you feel about increasing them again? The fear of just always being behind is becoming more and more considered, and then knowing that systems themselves would be paying so much more when there is an alternative that is less expensive. And I don't exactly know how the State Water Board, the Division of Drinking Water, can offer such low permit fees, but it's definitely an economy of scale situation. They're the ones who regulate all the larger systems and also our surface water systems. So, why don't you scroll down to the bottom, all the way to the bottom? I think so is that the one? I thought I had more below that. Well, so that's basically what we would need to charge is that first column there. And the next column is how much more than what the state charges is that amount. And I do think that there are some systems that would be willing to pay more, but I don't think that some systems even really feasibly can. But we're here to ask feedback. No decisions have been made. We have not brought this to the supervisors yet. That's sort of the next step is we wanted to hear feedback from this community. We actually have a survey that will be sent out to all the water systems. Basically after this meeting, we wanted to kind of prime the pump before we send out a survey, because we were like, well, if all we say is, do you want to pay less money? Everyone's going to say yes. But we wanted to have the discussion. We wanted to hear from you, take all that into account, and then we're going to start bringing this to management at the county first, within our agency, and then to the supervisors. So, they haven't really been brought in the loop yet, because we wanted to hear from you first. So, with that, I would be, we'd love to hear, maybe start with the commission and then open it up to the systems, if the commissioners have any comments.
I've been really noisy today.
Sorry. This is your whole thing now.
But I am the small water guy for the commission. And I represent we have 140 households, 140 service connections for our company. I just like to say for the record, and I've talked to my board about this, our annual budget, our all-in annual budget is about $120,000 a year. However, we just spent over the last 2 years $10,000 to support the litigation against Chrome 6, the new Chrome 6 MCL. You think about how big that is, that's 5% a year of our budget, because the cost of compliance is going to be astronomically higher than that amount. And I look at the $3,000 or whatever it is that we pay for our services through you guys. And I have watched the posture with the state where they unabashedly just want to consolidate us into, you know, Soquel Creek or whoever is, you know, closest. And we would gladly, not gladly, but we would easily pay double to keep this local. And I understand that many water companies can't do that. But I do want to say that it's, you know, the economics of dealing with someone that doesn't understand your situation and is putting all these additional cost burdens and everything on you. In the end, we believe that from an economic standpoint, it's cheaper for us to pay more to keep this local, to have somebody who understands it, than to send it to the state, pay less for a year or two, and then have some astronomical costs to comply with Chrome 6, comply with, you know, PFAS, but, you know, with no funding options available at all from the state to help us. So that's my blurb.
All right, we have hands up.
We do have hands up.
Start with Troy.
Yeah. Troy, it looks like you had a first hand up.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the state, all I can say is it really puts counties and small water systems in a tough spot. I mean, when I was lead for the drinking water program, I constantly, you know, went back when we'd have our annual meetings and, you know, would basically throw a fit, you know, because it was like, hey, you keep requiring more requirements from us, more testing, and you're not providing any funding. And then finally, years ago, they, you know, gave a little bit of cheese for counties to help fund things. And you know, for certain things, I was like, well, hey, increase the waivers. You know, if we're not testing positive for something, then, you know, increase the waiver because that's less of a cost to small systems. The long and the short of it is I've you know, served in the LPA capacity. I've also served on the California Water Plan, particularly around environmental justice and water quality. And I can tell you at every level of the state, small water systems are an afterthought. You know, when they think about, you know, we've got institutionalized problem solving here, right? So there's an interest in finding new contaminants and, you know, what else can we have them do? Because we've got all these people we got to employ here in Sacramento. And, you know, because large water systems like your Soquel Creeks, your San Lorenzo Valley water districts, they can always increase their rates to their ratepayers over thousands of people. And typically it's no big deal, you know, little incremental increases in rates to pay for additional monitoring, you know, additional requirements and all that. So they can absorb it. And then we would go back when we'd have our little bit of a time in front of the water board once a year and say, hey, what about small water systems? You know, with regard to compliance requirements, with regard to treatment, you know, oh yeah, you know, and so they really haven't changed their tune. And then, you know, when we talk about was it AB or SB 1188 coming down the pipe, I think that was passed and specifically in regard to what had happened with Big Basin Water Company and them not having the technical, managerial, or financial capacity to adequately run a water system. You know, what's the state's measure for that going to be when that kicks in for each individual small water system? So, yeah, I mean, I can totally understand why counties are giving, you know, these programs back because they just don't pan out. You know, budgets are getting tighter. There's less federal spending and state spending toward counties. And so it's a really tough position to put, you know, counties in. And then I also hear, with the small water system saying, hey, we rather have, local control, which totally makes sense. But it's really a tough spot that the state puts counties in terms of, making the numbers work around compliance and cost and all that. So yeah, so thank you for looking at this.
Thanks, Troy. Very knowledgeable. We appreciate you coming and speaking.
Adam, looks like you are our second hand raised. And I
Yeah,
believe
thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, so yeah, my name is Adam. I'm a water systems operator and environmental health consultant, health technician, and based on my experience working for the Monterey County LPA, also working at the Soil Control Laboratory, in my current work with water systems locally, I found that some critical points and concerns regarding the possible termination of the Santa Cruz LPA as a primacy agency. An important note to what happened with the Monterey County LPA is that in truth, they gave up their program to save face as they were likely going to be asked or told that they would no longer have an LPA program due to their poor performance, excuse me. Unfortunately, I found that the Santa Cruz County Environmental Health Services leadership and their water sources LPA to be poorly trained by their predecessors, irresponsible and negligent, and have brought this upon themselves for the most part. However, they, as part of a local agency, are the appropriate and critical team to regulate public water systems locally. They have been starved of adequate support and staffing, resulting in the threat of losing local regulation. The necessary outcome is to restore the support, funding, staffing, and adequate training of the County Environmental Health Water Services team and their LPA. One of the most important reasons is that the the Santa Cruz County Environmental Health Services is approachable and accessible. In comparison, for over 10 years, the water boards in the Monterey office have been behind locked doors, including their reception desk. They do not answer the phone. They do not want to be put onto the spot. They will have coached and prepared statements for any question you give. In the county, oversight personnel are very approachable, many of which give out their cell phone numbers, an example. Additionally, the County Board of Supervisors is local and accessible. With the state water boards, any complaint would create very inaccessible levels of bureaucracy. If one route fails, one must go through the state legislature or the governor's office. There will be no smooth transition to the water board's office. We will suddenly have nameless regulators with authority to issue citations who have never stepped foot in our water systems. The federal government in California are very different in political belief, but there's been a dangerous parallel effort. There's the centralization of authority and removal of local control. Let me remind us that the state has delegated powers similar to the county LPAs, in which the state is delegated by the federal government. This means that the state could also lose control. That could be soon, that could be years from now. Regardless of the consequences of what may happen, this is a dangerous pattern. We need to keep control local. Furthermore, the Monterey County LPA, they were robbed of nearly $2 million in funding. And despite the Monterey County having only a few LPA staff at the time of giving up their LPA authority, the state is requiring 12 full-time employees to manage their LPA when they were doing it just as good with a few staff. So we really need to keep the regulation local. Thank you. Sorry for the long comment.
Thank you, Adam. You've got some applause in the room.
And Martin, I believe you are next.
Hello. First of all, I want to say it's good to hear you again, Troy. It's been a while. Thanks for being here. Yeah, I agree that, Adam, it's having that local connection with the folks, people who've seen our system, people who understand it, is definitely a good thing. I just ran the numbers. We paid $2,487 for our 77 houses to you guys. Basically, it's $32 a year per house. So each house is paying $2.69 a month. If that were to triple, even, $8 a month, it's a lot, but it's not going to kill anybody, I don't think. I don't say I want to, pass on an extra $6 to everybody a month, but I can see that's something that could potentially be absorbed, particularly if we had time to, phrase that and then also to run it through, because we have to go through the PUC to get those rates approved. So, if you let us know a year ahead of time, preferably. But I kind of feel like it's a little bit like when we raised rates by 30% 15 years ago or whatever, and our customers were like, what the heck? You should have been doing that a little bit along the way. And I said, yeah, we should have been, and we didn't. And, unfortunately, you can't go back in time and, raise things a little bit at a time. But sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and say, look, folks, this is what it costs. And sorry, it's such a big jump, but, that's what we got to do because of X, Y, and Z. And I think your cases for that are good with, the state ending grants and things like that. I do really appreciate having people I can talk to on a regulatory level that understand our system at some level. Because when we go out there in the real world and talk to other folks, they don't really get it. And yeah, but just appreciate all the work that you guys do for us. And I think that, we'll get the survey and of course we'll fill it out, but that's my initial thoughts.
Thank you.
Kelly?
I'll just contribute to the overwhelming opinion that we should keep control local. Understanding that y'all are, of course, in a bind financially. And so I understand where you're coming from. I'm a contract water operator. I help small systems in San Mateo County, which is state regulated. There's Santa Cruz, which I have various regulators here, and also Monterey County. And so I'm in the process of getting a state regulator with my Monterey system, and they're crickets. And they probably hired 5 FTE engineers that cost $150,000 each a year to regulate their systems. And I find, and I used to be a state level regulator, but I find that they're out of touch and they don't know, they don't have boots on the ground, they don't have the right experience to do their job. They can read regulations and they're incredibly conservative, and it runs the gamut. But I just really very much prefer our local crew here. Not only do you provide the team that has staffed the water, I can tell the team that has staffed our small water system, I don't know what you call your department, but over the years you have a lot more experience and know-how, and you're much more approachable and are a lot more understanding. And you're here making resources to make compliance easier for us, for all of us, like point of use for Chrome 6, like consolidation research that y'all have done. And that even supports us keeping it local. It's like, yeah, some of our systems don't want to get consolidated. We want to stay connected on a local basis. And Adam, I loved your point about how the feds just might take over.
That was a whole level of fear I hadn't even considered.
But yeah, the cost of compliance is so expensive. Like my customers they just want to drill their own well. They'd rather pay $80,000 and be done with the mutual water company, because it's just exorbitant. So it's like we're facing it too, and clearly you all are as well. And so it's like, what do we do? And I guess I'm coming to really appreciate the work of San Andreas that I'm doing for Chrome 6. So I guess it feels like I'd understand if you got rid of this, got rid of the program. But I think all of us would have a harder time complying. So that'd ultimately be more expensive. And I don't know what that would end up like for the fate of our small water systems, how that would turn us. But yeah, very pro local regulations, local support, local control.
Well, definitely. So the survey we're sending out will be for the systems, obviously not the operators. However, please encourage all your systems to fill it out and, you know, we're gonna compile the results that we get and use that to make decisions. Obviously, you also can always talk to your supervisors, county supervisors.
I just want to do a quick time check
Yes.
too. We are 1 minute till 6, so if we
Okay.
could keep comments at a minimum, that'd be excellent. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Becky Steinbruner. I'm a customer of Martin and Jennifer's system, very well-run system. And so my hearing this was, I wondered if they would support it.
Mhm.
I'm happy to hear that they do because I do as well as a customer. We would be happy
Mhm.
to pay $8 or whatever it would take to maintain local control on and oversight. We have no guarantee that the state's number of $3.76 per household now would hold in the future. They could raise it too, and then we would have lost everything, our local control. I like the point that you make, ma'am, that the local people are here to help. The state, in my opinion, is there to consolidate, and I don't want that. So I also want to support keeping local control.
I saw one.
Are we gonna have a chance to review the survey before it goes out?
I hadn't considered, to be honest, having the commissioners review the questions of the survey, but how about this? If any commissioners have like questions they think that we should ask, can you email me by the end of the week and we'll send out the survey Monday?
Specifically, I'm
Yeah.
concerned about some of the questions being posed in a way to show what specific benefits we would lose if we turn primacy to the state.
So you're suggesting that we make sure that that is kind of outlined, just like the cost of returning primacy, not just like the cost of,
Not just the dollar cost.
not just the dollar
Mhm.
cost.
Yeah.
Okay. And there were some really great points brought up today. It's nice when other people say it first, so it's not just us saying that we will add that maybe some language to the top of the survey about that. And there's definitely going to be sections for comments. So we're hoping that we hear from that. So those of you on the call who are operators, definitely make sure your systems are you know, that they're responsive to the survey, because we really do want to hear from as many people as possible, and ideally some of the smaller ones, because I think that with you're right, when you've got 140 systems or even 80 systems dividing up the fee, it's not, even if it's tripled, which it would be, but it's not a huge burden. But when you're smaller, when you're like 16, 25 homes, it becomes a lot more.
Those homes that are on the borderline of being a state small water system,
Mhm.
those ones are the ones I would worry about.
So also, what kind of a timeline are we looking at for making this decision?
Great question. So the permits are on a calendar year. And so we would need to align this with the calendar year so that, and the state needs, I think, 4 months. So we basically have until, September. Yeah. To make this decision if we are planning to give back primacy for next calendar year. And so we're now, basically the survey is going to be really important to us to figure out how to message this to the higher ups. And then, the thing that we have not quite figured out is how do we make sure that we aren't, just hearing from a handful of very vocal systems, but we really are kind of, there are 68 systems and there are not 68 systems represented in these meetings typically. I think because the smaller ones, it's much harder. So we do need to, we're gonna try to make an effort to, if we haven't heard from some systems, to try to get some feedback from them before, you know, before we either double fees or give it back. Those are sort of our two options. So, but we'll talk about this again for everybody's interest. I think this will be a standing item for the commission at our subsequent meeting. So we'll be meeting again in June and August. So those two meetings will be somewhat critical to determining next steps, unless the next step we decide is let's wait another year, try to raise fees by some more modest amount and you know, kick the can, so to speak. So. All right.
We're at time.
Yes.
Does everybody, should we extend by 15 minutes or so, or?
I don't see any more hands up. And people will have an opportunity with the survey to provide us more feedback. So I think we can move on with this item and then.
Great.
Yeah.
Release of the, item 3 then, release of the small water system consolidation guidebook.
Yeah, and that one is a very short item. We have physical copies in the room right now for our folks that are in the room. But essentially, you've already seen the draft version of that report. We've finalized it and we've included some documentation on costs, estimated costs for pipeline installations for every one of our water systems. And give some guidance on here's some options to maintain sustainability for our water systems, ranging from consolidation, emergency interties, managerial consolidations, and just mutual agreement, aid agreements. So we've provided a lot of information for our county systems. The full report is in the agenda. A lot of links in there, that sort of thing, that for reference, and we'll also be sending out copies, ideally, of the physical report to all of our water systems. So that's just a note that it's been released.
Excellent, nice and easy.
Yep.
Can you also make them available to public libraries?
That's a good question. I potentially could. I'd have to look into how the process for doing that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Probably we printed some extras.
Yeah, we've got some.
Thank you.
All right, item H, correspondence, there is none. Item I, Board of Supervisors actions, there is none. There's a couple items of interest. Any comments on the items of interest?
I will just point out that we're doing a second push for the well testing, which is here under items of interest. There was an article about it because we did a press release. We also have a billboard up now on Freedom Boulevard in Watsonville. Our very first billboard. We took a selfie there Monday. It looks really good. We should have brought it. There's been kind of a recent push because of the press release. It's been in a bunch of the supervisors article or newsletters, and anyway, we are having a surge in interest. So I think we got something like 8 new wells this week. So
yeah,
Excellent.
Good stuff.
Good advertising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It might be under land use, I don't know, there's point of sale, time of sale requirements for water quality testing that got updated in September.
Yes.
And I'm just getting a lot of requests of like, oh, can the county just do it for free, or you even
We
give
can.
the link?
Yes.
But it's not the same.
It is now. It is now.
Okay.
Everything that is, all of the Title 22 is now fully covered by this program. That was part of the why we did the press releases. Everything that you need to do for the time of sale, or, well, you wouldn't do it for new wells. So for the time of sale requirements is now covered in this free program. And we have told all the real estate agent groups that they need, if they know of people who are thinking of selling their homes, that they should tell them, as soon as you're thinking of selling your home, sign up for this program because it will cover everything.
Yeah.
You know, they're UAP accredited labs. It's just a timing. If you're trying to sell your home in like 30 days, you're not going to necessarily get this done that fast. This is usually, we're up to about 8 weeks.
Yeah, it can turn around in a 2-month time frame, but
Great.
you know,
Which if you're on a septic system, that it's going to take that long anyway. So.
Yeah.
Martin, I saw you had a hand up. Is that a remainder hand up or?
Yeah, just on the real quick question on the graph that is at the end of that guidebook that you had, the strategies guidebook. I think I'm just missing the overall picture. Is this the total cost estimated to consolidate the system? For example,
No, that is a good clarifying point, is that is not the total cost to consolidate the system. That is the cost to install a pipeline.
Yeah.
So
a
bring it up
pipeline
to
to connect our system to another,
just
for
the
example.
pipeline. Yeah, it's not even necessarily the connecting it to your system. It's the trenching and laying of pipe. So the
Okay,
additional
and
cost on top of that would be significant.
and the breakdown on that, like for ours, it just shows three things. You know, most of it is this gray, which is non-impacted, and then those red and blue, landslide and expansive soil. Are you saying that's the amount of cost extra due to the risk of landslide issue?
Yeah, that one, the way that works is that there's the total cost, which is mostly associated with the length of the pipe, and then there's a slight multiplier effect that's added on anything that goes through like a liquefying soils area, because there's going to be additional work required going through there. And that's kind of just a rough estimate. It's not like an exact number, but there's a multiplier put on there just to show that it will be more expensive because you're going through an area with liquefying soils.
Okay, and since we have our system actually overlaps with Soquel Creek briefly, and we have an intertie,
right?
Is this then assuming 1.2 million to replace our main, or to their standard, or are you saying just to make the physical connection between our systems?
That would be to make the physical connection between the systems. So in your case, it was a little bit, because you have an existing connection. It's ours was set up under the assumption that you're connecting essentially to the well. That was how this program, that analysis was done. For most of these systems, we connected it from the nearest source for that water system down to the closest pipeline. So in your case, that's not exactly how yours is set up. But that's how the analysis was done. It connected the well to a nearby pipeline.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
And Adam, I see you got one.
Yeah, there's an important point of clarifying information that when people are saying Title 22 or the point of sale testing, it's not a comprehensive test. My point being that you don't need to test for everything under the sun, every single contaminant. It's just important to tell people what you tested for, what you didn't test for. You don't even have to recommend they test for other stuff that's not likely present, but just so they don't get a false sense of, everything's fine, because a lot of times when people refer to Title 22, doesn't include asbestos, doesn't include sometimes cyanide, VOCs, SOCs, those are your pesticides. And so yeah, just a point of clarification. Sorry.
Clarification, yeah. It covers what is necessary for the time of sale testing.
Okay.
Excellent.
I think that's.
Item K, any additions to agenda items for future uses?
Don't give us more. It's a very long list.
It is a long list.
Okay.
Great. And I move to adjourn the meeting. Second.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for those of you on the call. Really appreciate you coming, and
thanks, everyone.
Definitely do the survey when you get it.
Meeting. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank
it. Thank you for the input.
Good evening.
I couldn't help